Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my Ninja Turtles channel. I'm very happy to be joined today by Brian VanHooker, the host of the Ninja Turtles podcast, Turtle Tracks. He's been doing the podcast for a long time. He's interviewed dozens of famous Ninja Turtles people who've worked on movies, cartoons, video games, a little bit of everything. And of course, Turtle Tracks was featured in my video for the best TMNT podcast a while back, so I'm definitely a big fan. I'd like to recommend everyone subscribe to Turtle Tracks today, joined by Brian VanHooker, also a talented writer. He's written for Inverse, Mel Magazine, and Cracked as well. So welcome, Brian VanHooker.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
This is really cool you joined me. You do the all-interview show, the all-interview Turtle Tracks podcast. So you've interviewed a lot of Ninja Turtles people, Kevin Eastman, Pat Fraley, Steve Barron, Bobby Curnow, Roy Burdine, Rob Paulson, Kevin Monroe. The list goes on and on. You're a real pro, and I'm a real amateur, so I'm happy to talk to you. How did you get into Turtles?
Honestly, I don't remember a time before I was a Turtles fan. I grew up with it, with the original cartoon and the 1990 movie, and then I just stayed a fan ever since. I just never seemed to grow out of it. Even as I grew out of other things like Power Rangers and the like, somehow Turtles always stuck. So
Nice. Yeah, Turtles are one of those franchises that's kind of just always been around and a lot of good fans. And of course, you said you were there for the early 90s Turtle Mania kind of initial wave with the cartoon series and all that.
yeah, I remember the first turtle toy I got was a Raphael. Um, and yeah, I honestly don't remember a time before I was a Turtles fan. I grew up very much with that first show starting in '87, I'm sure. So
Nice. And how did you get into being well, do you consider yourself like a journalist or just like a podcast host or a writer? How did you get into all that?
I mean, I guess a writer first. But I've been writing since I was like 14 or 15. And mostly focused on like writing my own comic books or scripts. Like I've done a couple of pilots and things like that. Um, and then I got into magazine writing about 12 years ago. I started for Maxim magazine. Actually, no, I started at um there was a magazine for Adult Swim that was online only, and I started working there. But before anything got published, the magazine shut down. So then I moved to Maxim, Men's Health, and a few others. About 6 years ago, I started doing it full time for Mel magazine, where I was for about 5 years, and then they shut down a couple times actually. And then after Mel shut down the second time, I moved over to Cracked, where I'm now the senior features writer over at Cracked magazine, and I've been there for almost a year, give or take. So
Really nice. That's a cool history. Ninja Turtles and being a writer. And did you go to school for like journalism or something like that? Or did you just pick it up naturally? Are you just like a curious guy?
I went for mass communications, and yeah, even the journalism part. Like I kind of resist, not resist the term, but I kind of once in a- like it kind of still strikes me that that's what it is. Like I mostly do interviews with people like doing TV histories and histories of I don't know, mostly do interviews, and it's oftentimes histories of TV shows, movies, things like that. I also did the official oral history of The Last Ronin, which was a huge thing for me to be able to do. I like was officially like picked by IDW to write the story of The Last Ronin, and I was kind of bugging them for a while, for about a year as the issues were coming out. And once the final one was done, I got started on writing the history of it and got to talk to everybody involved with The Last Ronin for that story. Um, yeah, so I just enjoy talking to people, and yeah, I enjoy writing. So that's sort of, I kind of fell into journalism sideways a little bit through writing. But yeah,
That's cool.
yeah, I
Yeah,
like it.
journalism sounds so proper and journalism sounds so
Yeah, it
refined.
sounded like too official. Yeah, yeah. So
You do a great job of just having like natural conversations, and it sounds so formative. Yeah, like you're a TMNT historian, a documentarian. It sounds so proper, but yeah, you just have
yeah,
great conversations with people. and you're natural and relaxed. It's great to listen to your interviews, and that's cool to hear how the oral history of The Last Ronin came about. You had been kind of pitching that to them, and they decided to go for it at a certain point. Is that, you said that was the initial start of it?
Yeah, I reached out to them probably around when the first issue came out because I kind of had the I'd done enough things, like I'd done enough oral histories where I kind of like knew what I was doing with those, and sent them a bunch and said, "Hey, can I do this?" And they said, "Yeah, we don't want to bug the team while they're doing it, so check back." And it took a long time for the last Ronin to come out. It took like
Mm-hmm.
a while. So I just checked back every couple of months and said, "Hey, and then they just said, "Yep, just let me know when." Basically, I just kept checking in, remind them I existed. But they helped me put all the interviews together. I talked to Kevin Eastman for probably the third or fourth time I've gotten to talk to him, and for that, and Tom Waltz, who was awesome, and I actually went to interview Ben Bishop in person, who's a buddy of mine. Um, so yeah, I really it was a huge honor to be able to do it, and I was just grateful that IDW was cool with me putting it together. So
That was a really great article. That was a
oh,
really
thank you.
great
Yeah,
article. I read that and featured it on my weekly Tuesday live stream and talked about all the different parts of that. And then you released the audios for all the interviews, and it was great to hear that and hear how The Last Ronin came about and all the creative process and all the decisions they went through to produce the cool miniseries. That was really nice.
yeah. It was, and I was thrilled with what came out of it too. The last Ronin was a huge event for Ninja Turtles fans and people revisiting the Turtles after so many years. So what a great thing to be able to kind of chronicle, because I mean, Last Ronin is still ongoing, a huge part of TMNT history.
Yeah, definitely a big revival. Turtle Mania Part 2, maybe. And
Yeah,
I've seen you done those other oral histories, like one for Batman the Animated Series, one for Seinfeld. You've done a bunch of those. How do you
yeah.
decide which questions to ask? Like, there's so many questions to ask to these people. How do you decide, like, which? Do you have like an agenda or like a path you're trying to get them to go down, or do you just ask whatever
Usually,
you find
yeah. Like I
interesting?
try to get the story of like with Batman the Animated Series, it was about Christmas with the Joker, because that was like the official, like the story was about Christmas with the Joker, but I like it was a chance for me to talk to Mark Hamill and oh my God, Kevin Conroy. And so I kind of talked a little bit about their relationship, starting from when they first started together, recording that show, to up until a couple years ago. So that one was cool. It was really about finding out the history of that episode. So who wrote the episode, how it came together, any challenges while putting the story together. Also sort of the Joker highlights from that one and Batman highlights. So I try to piece together the story of, like, if I do an oral history of an episode, for example, I've done a lot of those of like Seinfeld or things like that. I'll talk to the writer first, usually find out where the genesis of the episode came from, any sort of memories from building the story out, anything that's memorable from like a table read or the taping. And I really just kind of go through the process of an episode of a television show, kind of start to finish. And that's generally my approach. Like with oral histories, they tend to be a little bit long for reading. So I kind of keep the chronology pretty straightforward, where I start in the beginning of where did this episode begin and end with how it ended, or if it won an Emmy or something, then I'll end there. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you did a great job. I think the last Ronin article ended with like all the toys and what's next for them in the future, and that was a
yeah,
great. You had a great little narrative in the article that told the story and explained where they're going in the future. And that was cool to hear your process. So you just kind of write down questions that you think will be interesting. Do you have any? I'm asking for any tips and tricks as an amateur interviewer over here from a real pro. Do you have any tips and tricks?
I just I'm trying to think what I usually just try to think about the process of making something. Like if it's so like if I'm interviewing, like, so with the podcast, it's a little different because like when writing an article, I need to get these specific questions. So like sometimes people will kind of meander during an interview. And for a podcast, it's not a huge deal. But for an interview where I need to tell a certain story, it's like, okay, well, I need to kind of redirect it and make sure I get all the facts I need to. It's like a checklist of
Hmm.
things I need to do. Um for a podcast, I tend to like, I'll have a handful of questions beforehand. Like I just talked to Judith Hogue yesterday, And I asked her about like when she how she got the part of April in the 1990 movie, if she was familiar with the Turtles beforehand, any memories from filming in North Carolina or the farmhouse or at the subway stop scene that where she was fighting all the foot ninjas. So I tend to try to educate myself as much as possible on who I'm interviewing, especially their turtle stuff, and just try to attack questions that way. I don't like to go crazy long. Like some of my podcasts are 30 minutes, some of them end up being an hour and change because we just get rolling. But I just kind of look through their history of them as a person and also them as a turtle person, and go about it that way. So
That's really cool. Would you like any tips and tricks from me about how to be a bad interviewer? I have plenty of tips and
no, you're
tricks.
doing great.
Oh, thanks. I know your podcast started, Turtle Tracks started on the Turtle Flakes podcast. Is that, it was on their feed originally with Rob Luther, who does the Turtle Flakes podcast, or was it Turtle Tales Radio at that point?
It was Turtle Flakes at the time, and I was kind of dipping so I was doing a lot of interviews at that point for work, and I wasn't always interested in who I was interviewing. So I honestly wasn't like thinking the world needs another podcast because there's so many out there. But it was more like an excuse because I wanted to talk to people like Rob Paulson and Pat Fraley and Kevin Eastman and things like that. So I had known those guys and listened to Flakes for a while, and we kind of struck up a relationship. And I started doing interviews, and I ran as like a little bit of a side show for them, in part because I just didn't want to. I hate editing, like I just can't stand it. The amount of like I don't love listening to myself talk. I kind of get bored. So like I said, I created the podcast as an excuse to talk to Turtles people. And once I've spoken to them, I've gotten what I want out of it. Like I cared less about putting it out there. It was more about like, oh, I got to talk to this person, which is super cool to me. Um, so I started out with Turtle Flakes, and they kind of put together the first couple of episodes on their channel. And yeah, after a little while, I decided like, okay, I'll do my own thing because I was enjoying doing it. But it took a while. Like I recorded probably a good 5, 6 episodes that sat for 6 months to a year, and then I would just get to editing them occasionally. And thankfully, originally my audio sounded terrible because I just didn't have much skill in that department or energy for fixing up the audio. And a guy emailed me. His name is Ian Williams, and he's like, "Hey, I love your podcast, but your audio sucks." And can I just edit your stuff? So for the last, oh Christ, probably 4 years, Ian has edited every episode and remastered the ones from early on to try to make the most out of my shitty audio. So unfortunately, so now what I do is I record, I send it to Ian right away, and whenever he's able to get it out, he sends it back to me, and we have an episode. So really, a huge part of the podcast is Ian, because again, once I stop recording an interview, I'm pretty much done. I got to talk to this person. That's awesome, and then my interest level goes down in the rest of the process. So for like Ian is a huge part of this podcast, so I'm super grateful to him.
Oh, great. Well, yeah, we all thank Ian. Podcast sounds great. I remember those first few episodes were a little rough, but they
Oh
sound
yeah.
great now. And why did you decide to go on your own? Why did you decide to leave Turtle Flakes and start your own
I don't know.
podcast
I think
feed?
I was just doing enough of that. Like it was kind of like dipping my toe in the water with them, and they're good dudes. I think it was like, okay, I have enough of these now where I think I want to keep doing it. Like I wasn't sure how far I would want it to go, and I mean like the sort of the I guess the criteria for who I want to interview is pretty much limitless. It's mostly like generally the criteria is like somebody who was officially involved in turtle history. So like in addition to the voice actors from the original cartoon, I've had like the guy who ran the Coming Out of Their Shells tour,
Hmm.
or one of the guys who was one of the people who was in the suit for that tour, or comic book artists and writers and all that. So really, if you're officially involved in turtle history in any way, there's a story there that I want to hear about. And so I just kind of like doing it. So I think it was simply like over time, it was like, all right, I can strike out on my own now and do it. But I was super grateful for the kind of training wheels that they gave me over at Turtle Flakes. So
Yeah, love the Turtle Flakes podcast. It's called Turtles Forever now.
yeah,
He loves the Ninja Turtles so much he's created 3 Ninja Turtles podcasts. Rob can't help himself, and I've been a fan of
Rob
all.
also came up with the title. I completely owe him for the title of the podcast, Turtle Tracks, because I was like trying to think of one, and he suggested that, and I was like, that's kind of perfect. So I stuck with that, and yeah, so I owe Rob for that.
It's great. Yeah, it's the first episode of the 1987 show, and of course, tracks could be a pun for audio tracks, of course. So it works out
Yeah.
pretty well.
So yeah, I
Yeah,
owe Rob for a number of those things.
yeah, he's a good guy. He's been doing that Ninja
Oh yeah,
Turtles
he's like
podcast
this. He's
for,
just the nicest dude. He's really a good guy. So
yeah, really good
I also
influence.
want to shout out to the person who did my logo, Aaron Hazuri. I kind of designed it. I knew I wanted something that echoed the coming out of their shells tour. So I had where Michelangelo's got his like busting through the shell with that guitar. So I designed a logo with Donatello busting through a shell with a microphone in the classic 1987 style of the Turtles. And I had Aaron Hazuri, who's a artist who works for NECA now, and does such a ton of awesome Ninja Turtles artwork. But he like executed my design for that and did a killer job with it, because I'm still like in love with my logo design that Aaron did. So also a shout out to him, who's a part of the podcast success. So
Very nice. Yeah, great logo, great audio, and great interviews. So I've got a lot. I've got my work cut out for me. I don't have a great logo or audio or anything. So
no, I checked out your channel. You got some good stuff going on. I listened to a few. I watched a few things before, just to familiarize myself with you a little bit. So
oh, cool. Yeah,
but and you know what you have that I don't is the principle, like the dedication to put stuff out regularly. I kind of, and I appreciate my listeners sticking with me, because like I'll record 5 podcasts in a row and shoot them out right away, and then you don't hear from me for 2 months because I get busy with work or whatever, or there's a drought with like reaching out to people. And then like so then I'll suddenly come back with another 5 that come out week by week. Like right now, I got a bunch of people all in a row, like the people behind the Next Mutation series, Judith Hogue. I'm talking to Sab Shimono, the guy who played Lord Norinaga in the 3rd movie, later this week. And I got a few people like come right back to back to back to back, but that comes after 2 months of kind of not doing any episodes, just because I was I don't know, exhausted. So I recently did an interview with a video game creator named Merso X, who did a fan game of Pizza Time, which is basically like Burger Time, but converted into Ninja Turtle, like a Ninja Turtle type game with Pizza Face versus the Ninja Turtles making pizzas, and which was inspired by a NECA accessory from a toy they recently announced. So right now there's like a bunch of things going on, but then maybe for 2 months I won't do anything. So you have a lot of regularity that I sometimes struggle with. So
well, you just have to abandon any hopes for high quality if you want the regular schedule. You just have to be completely unprofessional and just crank stuff out, whether it stinks or not. So that's my philosophy. But no, you do good stuff. A lot of people, you mentioned Merso X. He's the guy behind Rescue Palooza.
yeah,
And you've interviewed voice actors and suit actors, producers, artists, a little bit of everybody. Do you have like any favorite moments? Has anybody ever, do you have like a best guest or a favorite guest or something like that, or a good memory or something?
I feel bad picking a best guest, but for some reason Cam Clark comes to mind. He's just such a sweet guy. I had a lot of fun talking to him. So he was a hugely, like the original voice of Leonardo on that cartoon. The first
Hmm.
cartoon was huge. He's very close. Along with him were the four voice actors for this show were like a must for me, because those are the voices of the turtles I grew up with. Like those are the ones I was most focused on getting. So him, Townsend Coleman, who I've spoken to a few times and couldn't be sweeter. He was great. Rob Paulson, who was I'm like a huge fan of, and he's been part of so many cartoons between Turtles and Animaniacs and the second Turtles.
Hmm.
I went to a handful of his his Animaniacs live shows, and I met him at Comic-Con and eventually managed to work out a podcast interview. And he was just, I was like one of the people I was like kind of starstruck by. And Barry Gordon, who after 4 years of doing this podcast, I finally got him recently and was very excited to talk to him. So those are a few of the big ones. One of the first podcasts I did, which was a proud moment, was I talked to Steve Barron, who's the director of the first film.
Yeah, the
And
director of the 1990 movie, and he worked on music videos and stuff too. Michael Jackson, Aha, Take
yeah.
on Me. Really talented guy.
Oh yeah. And it was cool to talk to him because there was one question I was kind of dying to ask him is there's a kind of rumor in the Ninja Turtles fandom that Jim Henson didn't like the Ninja Turtles movie, that he thought it was too violent. And this bothered me because in addition to being a huge Turtle fan, I'm a huge Muppets fan. And so I was asking him, is this true? And he was like, no, there was some initial concern by Henson that there would be too much violence in the movie, but that when the final product was put together shortly before Henson's death, Henson was happy with what the product was, feeling like it was kind of a swashbuckling sort of fun adventure thing. So I was happy to kill that rumor because it's bothered me for a long time that my two favorite fandom things somehow Henson didn't like what Turtles was. So I was very happy to find that out.
That's cool. Yeah, that's nice to hear that they didn't have any hard feelings or anything, and that they were all pals, happy to work together. It's a lot of cool history there.
Yeah.
Have you ever had anybody like admit anything crazy on the show? Like, has anybody ever like come out on the show or like admitted they killed someone or anything wild like that? You've had to edit it out?
Nothing that crazy. I recently talked to a guy named David Shatraw. He was in the Michelangelo suit for the Coming Out of Their Shells tour. And he talked about like some of his early appearances, like passing out the first time the turtles were on those turtles were on stage, and the fact that the suits were so heavy that they needed to for their tryout shows that they needed to get rid of the shells, and like literally all the shells from those suits just ended up in a dumpster in some place in New England. And then they replaced the shells with jean jackets that were bedazzled and stuff. So he had some fun stories to tell. I'm trying to think of who else.
Nothing too crazy. Judith Hogue never admitted to, killing anybody. Not
No, nothing
surprising.
like that. Nope. I mean, like, no. I mean, some of the crazier stories. The Ken Mitchell one was a fun one because he was my favorite turtle artist ever, and now he's a friend of mine. He talked about like driving cross country with the Mirage gang way back in the day, with them all on motorcycles, which was kind of fun stories. But no, nothing too scandalous.
It's good
I
to
try to
hear.
keep it a little bit light if that's possible.
It's good to hear. You mentioned you've always like the turtles have always been around in your life and stuff. Like, why do you like them? Like, why do you think the turtles are so popular? Why do you connect with the turtles so much?
I don't know. It's funny. It's one of those things I don't love to psychoanalyze too much. I think the reason for their appeal is the dynamic of those four characters has everybody watching them identify with somebody.
Mm.
Um, Maybe less so because they didn't have female characters. I mean, aside from April, but they didn't have a ton of female characters early on. So maybe less so, but I think in that way. But I think because there's four distinct, diverse characters, there's somebody for everybody to latch on to, if that
I know
makes
what you
sense.
mean. Yeah, I like
Yeah.
those four character archetypes. Everybody kind of sees a little bit of themselves, or all four of those personalities in themselves. I agree. That's probably what I would say too. I don't like to psychoanalyze it either. I kind of just like it. I enjoy it. I don't
Yeah.
want to think about it too much.
Yeah. Like, so I've always been a Donatello guy. I was a nerdy kid and sort of remained a nerdy adult. So like, I think that's, again, there's always something to, I think there's something for everybody to latch on to and seeing themselves in Raphael or Michelangelo or Leonardo or Donnie. So,
Um, Real fast, the comic book company that publishes the Ninja Turtles comics right now, IDW, recently announced they're laying off like 39% of their staff. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, it's unfortunate. I hope Turtles is able to make it through. I know Tom Waltz, who's been like, that the series has been Kevin Eastman's a part of it and several other people, but Tom Waltz has been the heartbeat of that series. And I don't know if you read it, but it's fantastic. It's like the best iteration. I think it's the best iteration of any Turtles comic book. I think it's a great long running story that has had some fantastic storytelling, some of the best storytelling ever with Michelangelo, some really cool stuff with Mutanimals, some really great original characters like Old Hob. So, I mean, that series has been fantastic. And a huge, huge part of that, probably the biggest part of that, has been Tom Waltz. Uh, has been Tom Waltz. So I mean, I know he's sticking around with writing the show, even though his position there changed. Writing the comic book, even though I know his position changed. And Sophie Campbell's been writing it and drawing it over the past few years. I think she's done a wonderful job. Um, so I'm hoping that they're able to keep Turtles together. But I don't know. It's certainly worrisome because I think that comic book is really something special, and it's the longest running Turtles comic, but also like really for anything, it's the longest running Turtles anything that has told a cohesive story all the way through. And it's the most deep, interesting, intricate Turtles universe out there at all. So
Yeah,
I'm
it's been
hoping we're
over.
able to keep it afloat.
Oh yeah, it's been over 12 years and like probably like close to 200 issues with all the miniseries and stuff included, and it's yeah definitely the longest consistent ongoing kind of Turtle series. So they've done a really good job bringing it into the modern era and
Oh,
synthesizing everything that came before it and incorporating everything else. And I'm really enjoying it too, and I wish the best for that series. It's going to be tough if we get like a new comic book #1 for the 40th anniversary, a new publisher, a new #1. It's going to be tough to start all over.
yeah, and I can't imagine anybody doing that better. Like, what I like about that series is in addition to a lot of original ideas, it did kind of what the 2012 cartoon did, which I think my favorite cartoon is the original, but I think objectively speaking, I think the 2012 cartoon is the best Turtles cartoon. But what those things both did separately was pick the best of everything that existed up until that point and incorporate it into their narrative. And so you've got, the most obscure characters are in that comic book and pulling from the 2003 series, which is often underappreciated, and so many other things that like all these different parts of turtle lore are put in there, put into a blender and incorporated with a lot of new stuff and coming out with something really interesting. So I can't imagine anybody doing that better, especially honoring the history of the turtles for the past, 40 years almost.
That's nice. You mentioned you have an interview coming up with Judith Hoag, the original April O'Neil from the 1990 movie, the Next Mutation cast. Anything else? Any other interviews coming up soon?
Let's see. The ones that are recorded but not edited yet are the Next Mutation cast, the Next Mutation creators. So like the creator and one of the writers and Judith Hoag. Those are in the can and done. Later this week, I'm talking to Peter Hastings, who's one of the executive producers of the 2012 cartoon, and Sab Shimono, who was Lord Norinaga in the 2012 cartoon. I'm sorry, he was Lord Norinaga in the Turtles 3 movie, and he was also in the 2012 cartoon as the oh Mr. Murakami, who like ran the little place where they got the pizza gyoza
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So he was that guy. I think I have a few more coming up. I'm not remembering who.
Do you have any
Uh,
interviews set up with the Mutant Mayhem people? Any of the Mutant Mayhem cast or any of those?
Nothing yet. I don't think they're allowed to talk yet. So
Yeah.
I plan to go after. I already kind of reached out to a couple of them and haven't heard back yet. But my goal is to reach out to as many of those people as possible because so far everything from Mutant Mayhem looks fantastic. So
Yeah, pretty cool. You've interviewed a lot of great people, a lot of Ninja Turtles people, like you've mentioned, people behind the scenes, in front of the scenes. I'm just going to quickly read off a list of all these people. It's just so impressive. Kevin
sure.
Eastman, Pat Fraley, Steve Barron, Roy Burdine, Bobby Curnow, Rob Paulson, Kevin Monroe, Robbie Rist, Renee Jacobs, Ben Bishop, Kelly Hu, Tom Waltz, Trevor Zammit, Townsend Coleman, Merso X, Ken Mitroni, Steve Levine, Mitchell Insisti, Cam Clark, Chris Allen, Ciro Nieli, Michelle Ivy, Barry Gordon. Oh, what a list. That's just some of the names. What an amazing. And now you've spoken to a mentally ill man who pretends to be a turtle on the internet as well.
Yeah, I've done 60. Let's see here. Presently, I've done 67. I guess recorded 69 episodes and like done also like some little ones with like customizers of the turtles toys because I'm huge into toys as you can see behind me. So I've done a lot and I plan to keep doing it because it's been a lot of fun. So and I just like talking to these people. So I haven't gotten bored with it. So I'm gonna keep doing it.
It's good. Well, hopefully, speaking to you, my interview skills have improved, and hopefully, your interview skills haven't been tarnished by talking to me. Hopefully, your next interview doesn't go terribly after talking to me. But just wanted to say thanks on behalf of all Ninja Turtles fans. You do great work. Like I said, you're like a documentarian, a historian for the Ninja Turtles, and you do great interviews. And I'd like to tell everybody right now that's listening to go subscribe to the Turtle Tracks podcast, hosted by Brian VanHooker. Great interviewer, great author, and great Ninja Turtles fan. So I just wanted to say thank you for joining me. Do you have anything else you'd like to say? The microphone is yours.
Uh, no. Like I said, I appreciate you. I appreciate you being interested in talking to me. I'm not used to being the guest, so this was fun. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, you were a wonderful guest, and it made it very easy on me. Even setting up this interview was really easy. I sent you an email, and you just replied back, sure, I'd love to chat. Couldn't have been any easier. Pleasure to talk to. So definitely want to tell everybody to subscribe to Turtle Tracks today. I'm going to stop the recording, and we could say goodbye. Thank you again, Brian.
Thank you.